There we go. Yeah. Well, this is going to bring me to fame. All right, these are just basic questions, and your name is Mr. Robert Kedney, right?
That's right.
And these are just basic questions on Hastings, and maybe this is to help people out who haven't lived here for the good amount of time that you have.
I've been here a few weeks.
Yeah, a few weeks. No. All right. So the first question is, where was your family from?
My dad was born in Hyde Park, New York. My mother came from Brooklyn. They met in Yonkers, and we lived in Yonkers as a family for 1909 to 1914. For five years I lived in Yonkers. We came to Hastings in September 1914.
Oh, and so you yourself you lived here when you were 14. You were born in Yonkers?
I was born in Yonkers in 1911, and I came here in 1914. I was 3 1/2 when I came to Hastings.
Oh, boy.
My brother was 1 1/2 years.
Oh.
And my sister was born here the year after we came to Hastings.
Oh, I see. And so how long have you lived in Hastings since? So I guess it's around, that's a good...
1914 is 63 years.
Oh, boy, so I guess you've lived here all of your life. That's
Almost.
Great. Almost all of it. That's great. Do you remember the years that you were in high school here? So these are going to be the years, so I guess we're going to be mainly talking about. Maybe we should just say it.
That would be in the 20s.
20s, okay.
Because in 1925, when I was a freshman, I was in an automobile accident and was reported killed a couple of times, but I came out of it all right.
Oh, my
I graduated from Hastings High School in 1929.
Thank you. Okay, good. These questions are, going to be dealt with these years, based around those years. What were your parents' profession?
My dad was a railroader. My mother was just a homemaker.
Oh, and she, like most, what?
She didn't do any work until after my dad died in 1960. Then she went to work for several schools around here as a seamstress, and she always was making quilts and things like that.
So most women just didn't...
They didn't do anything but raise a family those days.
Oh,
that's all they could afford to do.
Sure.
We took so much of their time.
Sure.
I mean, as children, we needed a lot of attention.
Sure.
And we had a big place there, of course, comparatively big, and my mother and dad produced a lot of food from it. And my mother used to put up, anywhere from a couple of hundred or so jars of food every year so that we could eat in wintertime.
Oh, wow. Well, your father worked on what line of railroad?
New York Central.
New York Central, and that was, did most people commute to New York City? Or?
There was quite a few people commuted to New York, but
would you say that, what percent of the people, went to New York City to work?
I'd say about 60-65% went to New York.
No
And the rest of them worked around here. Like we had, before we had Anaconda, we had the pavement company, and we had quite a few of estates that people worked on. And there were, over at Mount Hope Cemetery, there was a lot of people worked, because that was all manual labor those days. There was nothing mechanical like they have today.
Oh, wow.
So the people in the area worked. A lot of them worked locally, I'd say, because there's a lot more shops those days, too, because, just take for grocery stores. What do we got for grocery stores now? You got the A&P, or else you go travel to Dobbs Ferry to Grand Union. They have a few of them. But in Hastings, when I was a wee boy, we had several. It was Wesolowski's, and there was Suchins, and a couple of them. That was during World War I, I'm thinking about, because they all tried to get your business, because, after all, that was what it was. Keep it local.
Sure.
And
you said estates. People worked on estates.
Estates like Billy Burke's estate. Over here we had Bear's estate. We had down on Warburton Avenue there was Seidenberg's estate. There was at least I'd say there was 10 or a dozen estates right here in Hastings. Big places. This place was a big estate. Where you and I live here in Châtellon. I can remember when there wasn't even a house on Châtellon except the house that you see when you come up, that Mr. Boy lives in. As you come up Washington Avenue, you see the house that sits on top of the hill?
Oh, right. right.
His house was here where my house is now. And they took it by horse when I was either a junior or senior in high school. I don't know, I was 28 or 29. And they walked it around, and they brought it down and put it up there. The same as they did with the Grace Church. The Grace Church, I can remember when it was down in Bollinger's parking lot.
Oh, and why did they move that? They just...
Well, because they sold the property and bought the property up on the corner where they built the new church, and then they brought the old church up alongside of it.
With horse and...
With the horse on a tourniquet with the soap on the boards, and just slide it some more. And one horse pulled the thing, and he turns, runs around. So it used to make me so mad because I felt he was doing all the work and the guys were pushing him.
Oh my
But they had to
goodness.
soap the tracks so that the things could move more easily. After all, you can't just put wood against wood and not let it have too much friction. So you have to put the soap on it so it would slide easily.
Oh, they made tracks for the...
They had the boards piled up, and that little church, that's tucked back in the corner, next to the Lutheran church.
Sure.
That church used to be the Episcopal church down where Bollinger's Plaza is, the parking lot, right next to that building. The big where Manzi's is.
Yes.
That. Well,
on Main Street.
On Main Street, right next to that, you could touch the brick building and the church. If you reach your hand, that was how close they were. Years and years ago.
Kidding.
And they pulled it out on the Main Street and brought it up the hill.
Wow.
And years ago.
So there were a lot of celebrities around town?
Oh yes, Hastings has had its more than share of celebrities, because even in just the theater alone, you had the two Watson brothers who were great actors, Frank and Ralph, years ago. Besides Billy Berg, Mrs. Ziegfeld, and
wow,
there were quite a few.
Did you often see them around town?
Oh, you used to see them around town, but you didn't pay. They didn't mean that much to you when you were kids.
Right.
They just were people, and I know the Billy Berg estate now. When you see all the people crowding on it now to sleigh riding today, we weren't even allowed on that estate. You kids crossed over there to go to school. We wouldn't dare. We had to walk down to Olinda and up the hill to go to school. You wouldn't dare step foot on the... And Billy Berg's had all these animals, They had bisons, and they had many kinds of dogs and other animals that they used to keep for Patricia. And then years ago...
Patricia was their daughter?
Their daughter. And she's in California now. She's Mrs. Stevenson. She and my sister were born about the same time.
Oh, no kidding.
She had a house, a dollhouse down here, what was the exact replica of Washington's home in Mount Vernon. It's right up over that pond where they're next to the houses that are built just south of the boys' house on Broadway, by the way the pond is. Mm-hmm. Well, right up on top of that hill, Patricia Ziegfeld had her dollhouse, which was an exact replica of the Washington's home in Mount Vernon.
That is amazing. And
she's in California now.
And so did she go to school here? The daughter?
No, she was a private school. We never did see her. The only person that I know that came out of their place, Jake Hoffman, who was my barber for many years, he had three sons that were in our three classes. His oldest son, Bill, and I were in school together. And Mr. Hoffman, he used to be a special valet for Mr. Ziegfeld because, for his hair and all that stuff. And so while he was with Mr. Ziegfeld, he didn't have his barber shop, and he was paid by Ziegfeld. But then, of course, when Mr. Ziegfeld died, then he opened his barber shop again. And another thing that Ziegfeld did, and so did several other people in Hastings, if you know the bear place that Mrs. Tasker has now, that's the place next to my mother's place.
Is that down Broadway?
Right down Broadway. Just before you get to my mother's house, there's a big estate.
Oh, yes.
That was the old Bear estate. Harry and Robert Bear were the Sandpaper Kings, and Robert Bear owned that property. And during World War I, to raise money for the boys in the service, they put on a show on that property. If you look at the property, it has tiers like seats in a theater.
Yes.
And they had that all covered. There's special people, had people from all over in the show game and rich people. And we watched it out of the apple tree that was up on top of the Bear place.
No kidding.
So, but I mean,
that's really interesting.
Mr. Bear, he married very late in life to a Mrs. Layton, who later brought her grandson in, who was in my brother's class in school.
the teenagers' attitudes about the war, World War One? Did I know in 1968, like they were against the world, against going to Vietnam, and what were
I don't know. See, I was only about 7 or 8. I was just starting school when World War One started. All I can remember from World War One is that my daddy had to work 12 hours a day, and besides that, he had 7 war gardens, and he supported I don't know how many families with food. And we used to, they used to have the old HS Tower, Hastings Tower at the foot of the hill.
What is that?
Hastings Tower, the railroad tower where they switch the trains and like that.
Yes.
Well, it's HS. Each one has its own call letters. Like Tarrytown is OW, BN and so forth. And Hastings, my daddy, as I say, because when we were privileged to go down to take my daddy's supper to him or what have you sometime, he used to always make the lights go red so that we knew we could cross the tracks without any trouble. And so yeah, my brother and I used to bring which we were little fellows, we'd bring his lunch down because that was the only way we could do it, because 12 hours is a long time on any job.
Sure.
But I can remember my daddy getting up at the crack of dawn, and that was the year that, you know what's over there is Curry Lane, over off Nepperhan Avenue?
Yes.
Well, that place, we had a whole acre of potatoes. And my daddy got those around to I don't know how many people to help them. See, as he said, he wasn't in the war. And another thing about war...
So he helped feed people around town?
Well, that was his way of trying to help, because he wasn't in the service. See, they didn't take him in the service because he was a railroader. Just like, to be honest with you, I was kept out of World War II for quite a while because I was a railroader.
No kidding.
I had to really enlist to get in.
Wow.
And you see, you've got to keep a strong background, and the railroads are what made this country. That's what's hurting us as much now, is that they've turned it over to trucks, not to put one against the other. But when they took the postal service away from the railroads, it cost the railroad billions and billions of dollars. And that's the reason why they shrunk the force. And that's the reason why you don't get the good service. The same way with trucking, you have LCL and LTL. And if you don't have the trucks today delivering like they used to, I mean, you run into difficulties. And but another thing I remember is from World War I, since we've gotten into the subject, is that there was a barracks. If you can picture the mobile gas station on Warburton Avenue, not the one across from the Catholic Church, but the one in South Hastings.
Yes.
Well, there's 5 or 6 houses across from there from Pinecrest North.
Yes.
Well, all of those places were built on some land that Mr. Zinser gave to the Army to build barracks. So that right below our house, we had barracks, and we used to climb the fence to go take my daddy's lunch to save ourselves. And all the houses that are north of that were the houses that we used to call the Zinser houses, and then across the street was the Zinser Flats. See, Mr. Zinser did a lot of building around this town. See, there was chemical. That's another place where a lot of people worked. And Mr. Zinser, whose son-in-law was one of our ambassadors. You see, we've had people in all branches of everything. And lived in Hastings. His daughter, Mr. Zinser's daughter, married this gentleman that was ambassador to England for a while. I just can't think of his name right now. But
that's really impressive. Wow.
That's part of it.
Gee.
Sorry, too much.
No, you're just going. You're just telling everything. I couldn't even How about World War II in Hastings? You said that you were here because you had to work on the.
I didn't get in until '43.
And so, what were some major effects of World War II? Could you feel it in this town? What were some things that they used to do?
We missed a lot of the fellows, because a lot of the fellows that we all played ball together years ago, and as one by one they were called away, we missed them, and then of course every once in a while.
Were there a lot of jobs like taken over by women, or did they?
Oh yeah, the women pitched in, because by that time we had Anaconda replacing the pavement company, and they could do the work in the wire mills just like they could anyplace else. So I mean, the women took over and did a good job as far as I'm concerned with a lot of places, and even some of your local shops were woman by women rather than man by women, I guess it'd be how to say it. I mean, they did a lot of things, and it was the same all around, and so. It was during that time too, though, that if you remember, in the 40s that we started to get a lot of men as teachers in the school. Up to that time,
really?
we only had women mostly when I was a kid. The only people that I can remember that had anything to do with the school besides the coach would be Dr. Myers and Dr. Hopkins, who were two marvelous educators and well-known.
Wow.
And they've done a terrific job in putting Hastings' school system on a very, very high plane. One of the best in the state of New York. And because I remember when I did my student teaching, and Dr. Langford asked me what my home school was. I said Hastings High School, and I said the reason for it is Dr. Myers and Dr. Hopkins, and he asked me if I knew them, and I said yes, they're both members of my lodge.
Oh,
so
wow.
I knew them. But I don't know of any, I'm not saying that the ones today, I don't know them that well, but I can't think of any two people, well, that were more dedicated to their work.
So very dedicated people.
They were really dedicated.
Mm-hmm.
We had school teachers. I can look back and I think of the late Miss Pingree and Betty Smith, Miss Herrick, Miss Newt. I could name you a dozen teachers. All the teachers we had, they were all dedicated. I mean, no nonsense.
Really? Was there any cutting of classes or skipping of school when you were in school, or?
I don't remember that. I know I never did, but I'm sure that none of the rest of them did. I wouldn't dare. My folks would clobber me.
Really?
Sure.
How were the wrongdoers disciplined in school, or disciplined? Do you remember? Or did you ever hear?
I never had to be disciplined, so I guess I don't know.
Sure.
I know they'd send them down to Mr. Myers' office, and he'd talk to them.
Was there any physical punishment, do you think?
I don't think so. I don't think they resorted to that. There's
Yeah.
no reason. If a person speaks with a stern voice and lays the cards on the table, I think anybody will listen, will understand.
Sure.
I don't think you have to use brute force on anybody.
Sure. Were there any high school dress codes?
No, we'd all be glad if we could get dressed.
Oh, really?
There wasn't that much
Sure.
thought about clothes.
Yeah.
Because all you went to school was to try to learn something.
Sure. Do you remember if were there many kids who brought their cars to school?
We didn't have cars those days.
Really? No,
ma'am. You walked to school or ran.
So not many kids had their license or anything?
No.
No.
I never got my license until I was about 21.
No kidding. So most people, what was the transportation around town? Just
foot. One foot in front of the other.
Really?
That's all.
And not many cars at all?
There were very few cars. I can remember, as I say, years ago when I was a kid, we didn't have, like a snowstorm like this that we're having today, this time, the only tracks you would have would be made by Borden's and Sheffield's milk sleighs. There wouldn't be cars, there wouldn't be that many cars going by here. You wouldn't see a car once in a week almost, I was going to say. There was not that much transportation by car in the winter time. Everybody moved by sleigh or stayed home. And to deliver the milk, they'd have to move by sleigh, and they came out of Yonkers with the sleighs.
Wow.
And we used to, if as you say, a taxi maybe taking somebody up the hill, and you'd have to get in the other set of tracks that the thing made instead of these. You'd have to get out of his way. But sure, they had taxis those days. There was Mr. Goodman, who had a street named after him. He was one time mayor of this town, and he had a taxi here. And they maybe one or two cars is all they had. That's all they needed to service the people.
Do you remember any special river events? Was there much river activity? Did many people swim in the Hudson River?
Oh, we swam in the river. Yes, we enjoyed that.
Oh.
Yeah. And those days we used to have the day boats and the night boats.
What were those?
They went from New York to Albany. You could the night boats. You could take in. They had the regular stops like Poughkeepsie and Hudson like that, and you'd have reservations on there and sleep and go to Albany or back. And then there was the other boats. They were the ones that had the black stacks. I can't think of the names of them right now. I think there were about 4 or 5 of those, and there was at least a half a dozen, like the Alexander Hamilton and Hendrick Hudson, and I remember those in the daytime. We used to see those going by.
Wow. Yeah.
From my mother's place. And from my mother's house, if you were up on the roof, finally, when they built the bridges, you could look south and see George Washington Bridge, and you could look north and see the Tarrytown Bridge.
Wow.
In a wide expanse. And as I say, you got the Palisades right across from 191 Broadway, and just a little to the south, speaking about World War II, you had the picture that when the rocks fell, that showed a picture of Hitler during the war, and a lot of people took many pictures about that.
Yeah, can you go into that? Did someone
Well, it's just the rock formation fell apart, like it will in any place, like the stone face you have in New Hampshire, right?
Yeah.
The stone face. The rock fell down, and when it fell down, it left a face there. And this face that was left from the Palisades was almost a replica of Hitler's. And everybody took pictures of it, and a lot of commenters in all the New York papers and everything else was all over. And everybody was saying that, and then later on it seemed strange that when it fell, he fell, so that was like one made note of the other.
Oh my goodness.
And another thing that's interesting about the river, the reflection of the Palisades, when it becomes a reflector, would tell you about the weather, because 3 days ahead of a storm, you get a strong reflection across the river.
And the water?
From my mother's place, you can see it off the back porch. Of course, there's trees all growing up around now, but I mean, years ago, there wasn't all that trees that we have.
Wow.
You could tell when you're going to have a snowstorm or a rainstorm for 3 days, which is better than these fellows that give you the stuff on the air.
Okay, so you could see, like, behind, like, the...
So if you look at the river, you get a strong reflection. If you got a strong reflection, you knew that was going to be rain in a couple of days.
Oh.
Otherwise, you wouldn't see anything at all. It would just, there wouldn't be any reflection.
That is so interesting. Wow.
It's one of those things.
Oh, do you remember any like special events that happened in Hastings? Like just like when you were a teenager that come to mind. When the major things that happened. Were there any special activities or?
Well, I remember there was a lot of baseball around. Everybody played baseball for the old Lyceum, and Mayor Reynolds, President and then later Mayor Reynolds, who was a very wonderful person. He was a good friend of Colonel Rupert's of the Yankees, and one time he got the old Yankee uniforms up here for the guys that played for the Lyceum, so that was a big deal. Those days, I can remember when the old Lyceum was down there on Warburton Avenue.
What's a Lyceum?
It was a building. It was part of the. It was a building where we used to have dances and everything else. We'd have their own. A lot of the fellows were into music, and they'd get together and they'd have a band and have the dances.
And this was where?
In Hastings, right here. It was on Warburton Avenue, across from what they call the Zinzer houses.
Oh, I see.
Just north of the mobile station. Yeah. And another thing you want to think about is where the Andrus home is now. That used to be the #1 hotel in America, the Longview Hotel.
Oh, wow.
People would come up by horse and wagon and for Sunday dinner, and from New York City up Riverside Drive. This is before cars were so prominent. They'd drive up from with coach and four or like that. I can remember seeing them as a kid.
Kidding.
And then later on, of course, when name bands got to be the thing and horses were replaced by automobiles, I can remember when Harriet Hilliard and Ozzie Nelson were up here. They had the longest stay of anybody. And they used
kidding.
And the Longview Hotel, and before the Andrus Foundation bought the place, they had their own little 9-hole golf course too around that Longview Hotel.
No kidding.
And
wow.
The Longview Hotel was, as I say, was the #1. I mean, everybody that had any money would come up out of the city to just have dinner at Longview Hotel.
No kidding.
And that was the ultra.
I wouldn't have even known that.
And then another thing that's quite interesting, down where North Yonkers Community Church is, there's a place next to that. Is an old house. I don't know what year it was born. I would describe it as here during the Revolution. And that was from about 1900 or thereabouts, that was the Lennon place, and the land that's across the street from there, that is now part of the Julia Dyckman where, across from where the grain school is.
Yes.
Well, that was all the Lennon estate. Or not estate, it was their farm. They used to farm. And
wow.
we used to go down and get the milk. As a matter of fact, I used to go down and milk the cows when I was a kid.
No kidding. Oh, wow.
It was something to do. I mean, in those days, we thought we were something to be able to go down and do that. So it never hurt you.
What do you think is one of the major changes or what are some of the changes like in the village itself? Can you think of any, or like any stores that have changed, or maybe the main structures, or are the streets all the same, or are the main streets the same? Main streets.
The main streets are the same. They haven't changed any. But out in this outlying area, my goodness, well, just take Shadow Lawn. This was a big open field when I went to school. Matter of fact, your house, I think, was the first house built in Shadow Lawn.
Oh, that's right. Oh my goodness.
And right here in the corner where Hoopers are now was where they used to have their office. See, that used to, Burns had, from the name Burnside Drive, Burns had this place, the last people had this when they split it up. And then there's a lot of places now, like if you take over, another thing, speaking about transportation, I don't know whether you realize it, but there used to be a streetcar come up all the way from Van Cortlandt to what they call Little Coney Island, which was, you know where Green Street is in Hastings? Or Farragut?
Yes.
By the Lambert's soda fountain?
Yes, over by Bill's.
That area right in there was Little Coney Island. They used to have a ball field there. And that was the other end. It cost you 10 cents to go all the way from Brooklyn up to there. A nickel on the subway and a nickel on the streetcar.
No kid, oh my goodness. And
it was known as from Coney Island to Coney Island. Little Coney Island was the other end. And that streetcar used to go Fulbright Avenue to Main Street, up Main Street, and then up Farragut Avenue. Because at one time, you've probably seen pictures of it, the car skidded coming down, and what's the A&P now is where the car wound up. The streetcar.
Oh my goodness.
Slid coming down the hill.
What year was that?
I don't remember what year it was.
Really, wow.
That's another estate. Speaking about estates, you realize that, 545 and 555 Broadway, those big places by the A&P?
Yes.
That used to be the Christie estate. So you see how many estates they had around here? They were all over the place. There were a lot of big estates.
Oh, wow.
And they broke that up and made it in, like they did the farmhouses.
Wow.
And same way with those places up on Broadway, 575 or whatever the number is, 755, just before you get into Dobbs Ferry, those apartments.
Yes.
That was a big estate too.
No kidding. So Hastings really grew a lot.
Well, it grew from 1914. If we had 2,500 and 3,000 at the very outset, we had a lot of people.
No kidding. So were there one-room classroom at the school, or? No,
I never had. Not in my time did we have one-room classroom.
Yeah.
My first teacher was Miss Pease, and I was very fortunate. I had good teachers all the way through. I'll tell you who else made a name for what you've probably seen his name around is Poling. Remember Dr. Poling, the minister? Christian Harold?
No, I don't know.
He lived here in Hastings. He lived up here because his son, Dan Poling, who was one of the people to give up his life preserver on the ship when the four chaplains gave it up during World War II.
Oh, no kidding.
He was in my class in school.
No kidding. Oh, I've read stories about that.
Yeah.
Wow.
He wanted to go in the ministry, and that's when he was living down in Philadelphia. They had moved from here to Philly. And he and Russell Hibbert and I were very close together. Russell Hibbert's folks were missionaries from China. When they came back, they were very active in the Reformed Church. That's the church
I can remember, I don't know if you know these stories about the design of the Empire State Building.
He lived here in Hastings, yes.
Where, and did he go to school here, or did you
No, he went to, his father did. The fellow Pat Shreve went to Scarborough School.
Oh.
But I remember his father, because his father, when they had a big meeting in the Reformed Church to commemorate the building of this Empire State Building, they had a big meeting at the Reformed Church. I remember as a kid.
Oh,
up there. Oh, yes, as I
that's
say,
really good.
in Hastings, I think we've had our share of people that you can call dignitaries or what have you, because they went to, all known.
Sure.
We had this fellow that, Henny Kolku, finally they called him, Henny Kokolowicz, who was a professional wrestler and one of the leading wrestlers all over the world in his time. And later on, he went with Bill Bendix and made some kind of movies for a while. He passed away here. He was in my class in school. Henny was my age.
No kidding. So really?
He was going with Tom Mitchell's daughter at the time.
Yeah.
Tom Mitchell, he's a good actor. You know theater.
Oh, no.
Tom Mitchell's a good actor. And I don't think Ann has seen the theater, but...
Are there, do you believe that there have been many improvements in the town's structure, like, since you've been going?
In what respect? You'd have to clarify that, because I wouldn't know what structure you're talking about.
Yeah, well, maybe, okay, maybe just the looks of the town, the appearance of the town, making it maybe nicer for people who are, maybe want to move into the town, maybe the town parks, have they?
Well, I tell you, I think we could do more with parks and probably improve the town. There's a lot of land that is not being used for anything that could be used for improvement. Mm-hmm. I think we've got a much improved railroad system for commuters. We got some trains that come right out of New York to Hastings, first stop,
Really?
Oh, yes. They give Hastings, I think, a very good shake on this transportation, because we send quite a few commuters through in New York all the time.
Yes, that's right.
And I think that this is, and to a certain extent, I think that the people in town, I think they almost demand things to be better. Now, you couldn't ask for a better fire department than we got, or a better police force. I think we got the most dedicated men in the world.
So true. That's so true.
I can't think of any of them that you can't say that they're just dedicated to the nth degree. Anytime you call on any of them anytime, and they'll give you a helping hand.
So great, yeah. That's
fantastic,
yeah.
I think. I think that they've done a good job too with the religious education in town. I think they've made it interesting enough for some of the young people to get interested in religion. I don't care what church you might talk about, they're all the same as far as that goes, basically. But they've done a lot in programming things for the younger people. I think that this is, and as everybody knows, our Boy Scouts are one of the best in the county, I think, if not within the state. And a lot of credit goes, of course, to Dan Ryle and the people that help him.
That's so good that,
We've got probably more than our share of Eagle Scouts.
Yeah, that is a reflection on the town, I suppose.
I think it is, because it shows that they're setting up a program that will interest the kids enough to want to be a part of it. That's why I'm surprised that I don't see as much baseball up there at the ball field like I used to see when we were kids. We were up there all the time. We had a chance to. And another thing too, we had a lot of outside for basketball. Even in the cold day in winter, we'd be playing basketball in our overcoats.
No kidding.
Couldn't get in the gym, of course. Not like today, you can get in the gym. But years ago, you couldn't even get in the gym. We'd be playing basketball outside in our overcoats.
Oh, wow.
But there's no, that's the one thing that I think that has changed down, as far as I'm concerned. I don't know the reason for it.
Yeah, what would you like to return, if there could be like a turn time, you could have something returned to Hastings that, isn't present at the moment, but, you miss from the past. But
I can't think of anything that I could make it.
That's really good. That's, you remember all the good things. Yeah, it's so good that you remember all the good things.
I know one thing, that I look back at my education in the school, and I feel that it was more than adequate. I think Hastings has always had its share of good teachers.
Yeah, and has it always had like a good reputation?
I think it's had a fairly good reputation.
Do you remember what did the teenagers, what were their plans for after college, when they graduated from college? And most of them
I don't think many of them were fixing to go to college. Most of them are going to go right to work.
What percent, go to work and get
I would
married?
say if you had 15% going to college, you had a lot.
Wow.
Those were only the people that lived up on the top of the hill up in Billard Avenue. Because they had the money they could support it. After all, it costs money to go to college.
Sure.
And I know that you had to work your way through college if you want to go to college. I know from experience.
Sure.
I went to work for 4 years before I went back to college. So because I knew my folks couldn't afford it.
And what did you end up doing with your life? What did you end up doing?
Railroad. Because when I came out of college in '37, you couldn't buy a job. That was the Roosevelt depression. And although I had a degree to teach, there was no openings for teaching. So I went railroading and I stayed with it.
Oh, well, that's very good.
It's an interesting profession. I think it's a way of serving people. And
sure, it's an interesting life. Sure.
I honestly feel in myself that if you're helping somebody, that's when you're enjoying life the most.
Sure, well, you certainly helped me a lot out in this interview. Thank you so much, Mr. Kedney.
Okay, dear.
Thank you.